Suppose that I am approached by an armed robber. I preach to him the virtue of disarmament. He is persuaded, and throws his gun away, and I keep my wallet. This result will be pleasing to me, and most of us will judge the outcome morally praiseworthy. Still, it can hardly be said that disarmament meant the same thing for both parties, or that the net result was an equal gain to both, though of course we both ended up disarmed. The suspicion remains that I managed to put something over on my primitive and slow-witted accoster. Change the circumstances slightly. Say that I, the good citizen, have the gun, and the would-be robber, only his 2 fists and a club, perhaps. But I don't like guns, thinking them dangerous for everyone concerned, and also a barbaric way to settle disputes that ought to be dealt with rationally, by, let us say, a dialogue. So I enter into negotiations with my 2-fisted friend, and we eventually agree to disarm, mutually, of course. I throw away my gun, and he throws his club, or seems about to, when I get rid of the gun to prove my good faith. Again, the result yields an abstract equality. Both sides disarm. But this has no relevance to the concrete meaning of what has happened, namely, a reversal in power relationship. It should be obvious that from a practical standpoint, disarmament measures, and even through their psychological effect, mere disarmament campaigns that do not lead to specific measures, are to the relative advantage of the side that has the inferior arms, or no arms. My belief in non-violence may spring from the purest of ideals, but if I have no weapons and you have many, it will also prove a very useful belief if I can get you to share it sufficiently to lead you to throw away your big bombs, unload your revolvers, sheath your truncheons, and kennel your police dogs. The first large-scale disarmament campaign developed in the latter half of the 19th century. Its chief specific proposal was to prohibit a monstrous new weapon of annihilation, the steel-clad dreadnought. Not surprisingly, this demand was pressed most fervently by the nations of continental Europe, and resisted most firmly by Britain, which was the only country at that time equipped with the technology and industry to construct dreadnoughts. In the 20th century, it became the turn of British and American opinion to campaign for the prohibition of a monstrous new weapon, the U-boat, which happened to be the only device by which Germany might have challenged the Anglo-American control of the seas. All varieties of pacifism, though from the point of view of this or that individual they may rest on moral and theological beliefs, have similar connections in practice. The more my opponent is affected by pacifist ideas and feelings, the better it is for me, practically speaking. And this fact is so unquestionable that the propaganda and psychological warfare services of all modern governments have deliberately promoted pacifism among the enemy armies and civilian populations during the wars of this century. Several of the governments have included in their war preparations a preliminary sowing of pacifist ideas in prospective enemy quarters. It is a mark of the ascendancy of the liberal ideology, with its attendant guilt, in the advanced Western nations, most particularly in the United States and Great Britain, that for the first time in history, disarmament proposals and pacifist-tending ideas are being pressed not by the nations with inferior arms in order to weaken the stronger, but by the stronger in order to weaken themselves, to sacrifice their relative advantage, and thereby to lessen their ability to defend their interests and ideals. True enough, the governments of the Western nations have in some measure been trapped into disarmament pacifism by the calculated manipulations of the communists and the intuitively shrewd demagogy of the Afro-Asian leaders. But quite apart from all deliberate efforts from the outside, the disarmament pacifist trend in Western opinion is also self-imposed, a derivative of the rationalist habit of understanding peace as an abstract universal instead of a concrete and dynamic condition, and of the Western sense of guilt at the immensity of its own power. Analyzed dialectically, that is, in relation to their existential and historical context, disarmament and the search for peace do not have a single unambiguous meaning that can be established by a fixed definition. The operative meaning of such terms must be discovered in each case by relating them to the actions, interests, and goals of the person or group that is using them.